Welcome to the EQ Worship Podcast. Our desire is to equip fellow worshipers, leaders, and musicians to do worship well in their communities. Join us in this conversation. Hey guys, welcome back to the EQ Worship Podcast, and of course I'm Brandon and this is Zach.
Hey guys.
And so we have some news, I guess, about the conference that we just were at in August. It's the CCA Worship Conference, and for those of you that don't know CCA, it's just the Calvary Chapel Association. And so we did that down in California, and man, it was so fun. It was so cool. I'm not exactly sure how many people were there, but definitely a few hundred worship leaders were there and were able to be a part of it. And it's just cool to be a part of these different communities of worship leaders and things, and a lot of really great questions. And one of the things that I really enjoyed was I'm trying to remember his name, but he was singing the Psalms. He just kind of like sang some Psalms.
Oh, yeah.
Do you remember his name?
No,
I'm feeling
he's a
really
good guy.
bad right now. I'm supposed to be connecting with him too, so maybe I'll remember his name. Anyway, but he just kind of like, took a few verses of the Psalms and sang them, and I just thought it was so cool. Not that I haven't seen that before, but it was really cool to see that in a conference that was, definitely professional, and everything was in a really cool setting and everything, and yet he went in and he just started singing some Psalms, and I just thought it was powerful. But yeah, we just want to say thank you to Holland Davis for inviting us, and we're also posting these podcasts on the Calvary Chapel Worship Leader Facebook page and everything, and so for those of you that are there, welcome. Okay, so we always start with the scripture of the episode. So Zach, it's yours.
Let's go to 1 Peter chapter 5, and I'll read a couple verses there. It says, "Shepherd the flock of God, which is among you, serving as overseers, not by compulsion, but willingly, not for dishonest gain, but eagerly, nor as being lords over those entrusted to you, but being examples to the flock. And when the chief shepherd appears, you will receive the crown of glory that does not fade away." And, this is a passage that's written to pastors, and it's one I hear quoted at pastors' conferences quite often. But, Peter was, like most people in this day, well familiar with shepherds and shepherding and what that meant and the attention and care that a shepherd would give to his sheep. And it's interesting to me, we talk about being worship leaders and worship pastors, which Brandon and I have both been, and Brandon currently is at the church. And that's not a real term in the New Testament speaking. There are pastors, there are overseers, and there are worship leaders, especially in the Old Testament. There are guys who for sure had the gift of leading worship, but there's not a specific title given in the church to worship leaders. They're just pastors, they're overseers, and to me that just speaks of the care and the love that we're to have for people, not just about, being for the position, if you will. We should care more about the people than the position. And sometimes I think we need to kind of go back to passages like this that are real just pointed at pastors more than just looking for, passages in the New Testament about how to worship. Because when we understand that so much of what we do as pastors is relational, it's loving people, it's caring for people, it's bringing them along and trying to build them up in their faith, you kind of understand a lot of how that corresponds to worship leading even, and how that is meant to be part of our mission as worship leaders. It's not just to lead songs. I mean, that's not the end game of a worship pastor. I think it's hard to lead people if you don't love them. And, if you don't actually are, invested in some people's lives and you care about them and you have these relationships with people. I contrast that with the world and how the world does things, where, people in the world are way more interested in titles than they are in the people. They're way more interested in position than people. people typically in the world surround themselves with people who just agree with them. And that's not how we're especially as worship leaders. I think people are highly critical already. But I think it helps to have people around you who will tell you what's best for the ministry, that will encourage you in that way. And I think as worship leaders, as worship pastors, we should be people that rather than criticize, we should encourage. We should be building up the flock. And I just encourage you guys in that. This passage specifically just speaks to me and to the care that we need to have. And again, the contrast there is between worldly leadership and godly leadership. And again, I think that just goes right in step with worship leading. It's not, you can't separate the two. You can't say I'm a pastor and this is how I do things, and then when I lead worship, it's different. I think the two go hand in hand. And so I think this passage, again, speaks to that really well. And that's all I wanted to share. Brandon, you have any thoughts on that?
Cool. Actually, yeah, that was great. That was great, actually, because I've been thinking through this a little bit more lately. But I just want to encourage you, all of you guys and girls that are, maybe you have, and it's not all about titles per se, but maybe you have the title of worship leader at your church. Maybe your pastor doesn't want you to be considered a worship pastor. But I want to encourage you that no matter what, by you being put in a position of leadership, you are now appointed to be a leader of the people that you are in, at least the people in your worship team, but also the people that go to your church. You are leading them into a very, very important part of the liturgy of our church, of all churches, is the time of singing the truth and proclaiming the truth and saying thank you to God. And so with that said, I want to encourage you to start switching your mind over to the idea of I need to be pastoral, which is what he's saying. But I just wanted to kind of emphasize that some of you guys will never get the title worship pastor. And really at our church, we never even, I know that that's what they think of me, but that we don't ever even call each other pastors. None of us do. I think some of us accidentally say Pastor Steve, even though he is Pastor Steve. But for the most part, which is our senior pastor, but for the most part, we just call him Steve. That's just kind of how we are at our church. And so, anyway, and then one other thought too is musicians in general, especially those of you that are worship leaders that would identify more as a musician / artistic type person as opposed to somebody who has the pastoral mindset. Okay, I want to challenge you actually with saying, by you being put in this position, you really do need to think of it as something different than just you're trying to be artistic and play music every Sunday. And you need to be thinking, what are these songs that I'm choosing? Are they songs that I really like and I think I sound good on? Or are they songs that, that actually your church is going to want to sing? And that could go down a lot of different avenues. It could mean that maybe your songs that you're singing are songs that they want to be singing, but sometimes the songs that you're choosing to sing are songs that they need to be singing. But either way, you're not thinking of what you sound great on or what you're, this is not, I just really err on the side of it's not a performance. It is an organic experience together that we are all doing together. And it's not, I'm performing these songs for these people. It is, we are performing, I guess, if you want to use that word, these songs for God, and we're singing to God. So anyway, that was really great. Cool.
Story, Brandon, funny story. You're up this time. Tell us a great, hilarious story or hijinks of past worship experience.
Okay, well, so I have a really crazy one that I was kind of not sure if I was going to share, but I'm going to do it anyway. and okay. So I'm touring at this time. This is probably about 8 or 9 years ago, and I'm somewhere in Montana, and I can't really remember what city I was in.
Who knows?
But I was at this church, and it's me and the band that I travel with a lot, and we're there, and we're in the middle of a worship night, and all of a sudden, I just feel this like overwhelming desire to throw up. Okay, so so I go, oh my gosh, we're in the middle of a worship time, and I just kind of like continue on this song, and eventually I just go, I've got to go. So I ran off the stage and went through the side door. This church only had a side door, not a back door, to get off the stage. And so I go to the side door, I go to the bathroom, and I throw up. Okay, and my band is just up there going, and they just decide they're gonna just keep on playing. Spirit's leading you. They're just gonna keep on playing. So I'm doing my business, okay, and then I run out. But the way that they explain it, so I had, I definitely had a fever. There was something wrong with me for sure, and so I had been sweating, and I sweated out of my shirt. So I took off my shirt. I had another shirt underneath, but all of a sudden I come in and I bust through these doors, and I guess the way that I did it was I hit the door really hard, and all of a sudden it was like this, like saloon doors like opening up, and I was like, down to my undershirt, okay? Which, by the way, was not like a tank top / wife beater type thing. It wasn't that, but it was definitely like a white shirt. It looked like an undershirt. And I just like stumble in, I grab my guitar, and I just play, and I played only like a few more songs. But anyway,
only like 3 or 4 more songs.
Yeah, and then I was done, and then that night, man, I had a brutal time. So anyway, that's my experience. So if you, I bet you anything, most of you guys have not had to throw up in the middle of a worship set.
Never
and you had to go off. So that is a bad one.
I can't even think of a time where I was like really sick, legitimately. I mean, I've had colds and stuff, but I think the worst is probably just trying to hold in a burp more than anything.
Yeah.
Or mastering the art of burping, not in the microphone, then right back in the singing. But
yeah,
no, that's bad. Good. Each time on EQ Podcast, we like to dissect the popular worship song, and this month's song is "Build My Life" by Housefires. Pat Barrett does it on his new album, which is really neat too. He's from Housefires, but I love this song. I think it's fantastic to, everything it means, and the way it's built up is just pretty great. And there's a few different aspects to the song. The verses are pretty much. I was actually listening to a YouTube video on this song by Housefires, and they're saying that the verses were written after the rest of the song. And Matt Redman just kind of said, "Well, I have some verses," probably in his British accent, and he's like, here's some verses, and they're like, these are great. And so they kind of tagged them on as an afterthought, but they're just pretty standard, worthy of every song we could sing, worthy of all the praise we could bring, worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. And same with verse 2. It's Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only one who could ever save. Worthy of every breath we could ever breathe. We live for you. The chorus was written second, which is kind of interesting. There's the bridge that was the first part, which we'll get to in a moment, because that's kind of the best part of the song. But the chorus is, "Holy, there's no one like you. There's none beside you. Open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are, and fill me with your heart, and lead me in your love to those around me." And before you even get to the bridge, Brandon, maybe you could speak to this, but like the chorus, I think it's so profound and so moving because of how missional it is.
Oh, yeah.
Do you agree with that?
Totally. Well, the idea here of where it says, "Open up my eyes in wonder and show me who you are, and fill me with your heart, and lead me in your love to those around me." There are not a lot of songs that talk about leading me to love those around me.
Yeah, there's not.
And that's what even though this, definitely the bridge is sort of like the pinnacle of the song, I think that and it's funny how songs are written, and the purpose of why we dissect these songs is not just because we want to talk about how awesome of a song it is, or the opposite, how faulty a song is per se, and that we think the song's awesome. It's actually just to kind of help us all see, why are these songs being sung so much? Like, what makes them do that? And I think it's because of the combo of this chorus and this bridge.
Yeah, it is.
And it's that when you talk about leading me into your love to those around me, we're saying, God, I am unable to love those around me, at least the way that you love them. And so I need you to lead me in your love to do that. And then what we're saying after that, we're saying, so because of that, because you've led me into that spot, I want you to build my life upon your love. Because I realize that your love is a firm foundation. It's the thing that the only way that church works is if we are built upon the firm foundation of his love. And I mean, that's why our churches need to sing that, because we think that it's the firm foundation of truth. Don't get me wrong, truth is good, okay? But there's a lot of really hard truths out there that certainly it's going to be hard for us to build our life upon the truth completely. We need to build our life upon love. And it's not saying that it's void of truth, because his love is true, and it actually... the way that he it says speak truth in love, or and the idea there is love is something that softens the blow of the truth, because the truth is going to be hard. And I've been to many churches throughout all my traveling where the pastor is just spitting out truth, but it is in a way where it's almost harsh and harmful to people, because they feel like, I can't do anything with this because I'm a failure, or there's no way that I can do this that he's saying. But ultimately, if we're able to say we are building our life upon love, which means that love is sort of like this, it's like the foundation of grace. Grace wouldn't be there if God didn't love us, like God had to love us first to show us grace. And so it's the same thing for us. We need to love others before we're going to show grace, before we're able to fully, wrestle with the truth. We need to experience God's love. And that's why I think that the words, that last part of the chorus going into the bridge is so important.
Yeah, I said, the bridge to me is the pinnacle of the song. I think it has more to do musically than, like Brandon said, content as far as lyrics, but the way it builds up musically is very pretty. And then also, I just like like he was saying, resonate with that idea of building your life. I know there's a couple scriptures that come to mind. One is Psalm 127, unless the Lord builds the house, they labor in vain who build it. And I think of the fact that we can try to build our lives upon other things, and we can try to build our ministry and try to build even our families upon things that don't ultimately last. They have no firm foundation. And if we're building our life on the solid rock of God and his love, and that the other passage is Matthew 7, where Jesus talks about the contrast between building your house and your life upon sand versus the rock. But man, that is just a great image, and I think it's a great prayer to me. When I get to that part, it's a part of the song where it's not just for me, I'm singing this to God anymore. Now it's me engaging with the Lord, saying, God, help me to do these things that this song is calling me to. Which I like songs like that. They kind of elevate you in a sense, to get you to kind of aspire to be closer to the Lord. So
yeah, this is kind of like a pretty deep theological idea for a second, okay? But if we were to think of characters of God, okay, we see in the scriptures that a character is love and a character is just, okay? And so what is interesting to me is, in order for grace to have ever happened, because if he is a just God, it means that if we deserve hell, we deserve hell. He's a just God.
Yeah.
But the thing is his love, it didn't override justice. It didn't override it, but what his love did is he found a way to be able to pour his wrath and his justice on to his own son.
Yeah.
And that, to me, is so powerful for us to realize. We need to build our lives upon his love, because his love is what ends up just making him go, I'm going to do this, and of course, God knows everything, and he knew he was going to have to do that and all that kind of stuff. But to me, it's just, I'm just so thankful for God's love, because I wouldn't have grace if his love didn't exist. And that, to me, is that's why I want to sing this song so much.
Yeah.
That's why I want to sing this song constantly, build my life upon your love, So, yeah,
Good song.
such a good song.
We have questions from some listeners, and appreciate these questions. You guys can always email us, eqworshipband.com or at gmail.com. Go to our website, actually. That'd be a great place, EQWorship, or on our Facebook page. But, man, we appreciate the questions, and we have a lot of them today. I don't know if we'll get to them all. But one of the questions that we kind of get routinely, not just from this regard, but from different churches that contact, well, not me specifically, but mostly Brandon, just because he's got so many connections in the Calvary world. The question is there a resource or database for Calvaries that the affiliation we're associated with, looking for worship leaders? How can we connect churches in need with worship leaders looking for ministry? And Brandon, can you answer that question?
Yeah, I'll just answer that question really fast. Honestly, guys, there isn't one. There really is not a database for this. And by the way, even though we are a part of the Calvary Chapel Association and just the greater family of Calvary Chapels, we really do connect with all kinds of denominations and everything. So I get these questions not just from the Calvary Chapel pastors, but honestly, there really isn't in the Calvary Chapel world. We don't have a good database for this. And so the hard part is that the reason why he's specifically asking for a Calvary one specifically, as opposed to going into some of the other ones other places, is not because we don't like other denominations, but I know this person, and the reason why is because when you're going to bring somebody from the outside, it's hard enough to see if you guys are going to jive personally, okay, and interpersonally with all the different staff members and everything, as opposed but like you add in the possible, even if it's just minor theological differences, you're going to deal with some bigger issues. And so it's sort of like we're trying to take care of that piece first. Is like, do you at least identify that, with the Calvary Chapel distinctives? Or, I mean, honestly, like if you're part of the Assemblies of God or the Foursquare or whatever it is, the people that you're looking for, I know you want this to happen. You want the person coming in for them to identify with whatever you guys are made pillars of your guys' denomination. Yeah. And it's just because you would much rather not have to deal with that part when they come on board. And so all that to say, for the Calvary Chapels, we don't have that. And one of the things that I am really prayerfully seeking is coming up in this next winter time is we're going to actually start a worship discipleship school. And really the idea there is simple. We just want to raise up people who are already maybe musically inclined to some degree, help them get better at that, but it's going to be actually, the pure purpose is not just to raise them up to be awesome at what they do, but we're actually going to give them the missional heart, I can't give that to them, but to show them in the scriptures and help them cultivate the missional heart so that they will be willing to go to smaller churches around the United States even, because to be honest, most of these people who are calling me are people who have not even small churches, just like medium churches that even have a budget to pay full-time, some of these guys, but they have no way to find anybody in their town that would work for them. And I just want to help people see that there is a need, and for them to go and try things, or to go try out hanging out with that pastor. So basically the idea is that it would be a 3-month at our church thing that we do, and then another 3 months they would go and intern at some of these churches all around that we have talked to, and then we would actually connect with them once a week via Skype or on the phone and help them through some of the stuff they're doing. So anyway, be praying for that. And if you are really, if you're interested in that, if you're interested in going to it or sending somebody from your church or whatever, please contact us at EQ Worship Band or just EQ Worship.
EQworshipband@gmail.com.
EQworshipband@gmail.com.
Yeah.
Or is it EQ Worship Ministry?
There's both. We have both.
EQ Worship Ministry @gmail.com. Anyway, it doesn't matter.
They both work.
Both of them work. But yeah, do that. What were we going to say?
I think there was at one point something like this, though. There was a worship school, and out of the college and stuff. But I think
they have a Calvary Chapel worship school down at Costa Mesa. There's nothing wrong with it at all. They do a great job, but they're not. The one thing that they're not doing, the piece that they're not doing, is they're not per se getting them in contact with the churches that are really in need.
Gotcha.
And so I'm not saying that you couldn't call them, but I've had other people who called them, and a lot of them already are claimed at a church, and they're just learning to be better. They're going to go back to their church. Okay. So it's just a different function. They're doing a great job.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Second question: how do you get your team to practice the songs for the upcoming week? Well, I'll share from my experience, and then Brandon can share from his. When I was the worship pastor here, I would send the songs out like early in the week with YouTube videos, and it's just YouTube's an amazing resource. You can go on and find any song and find it the way you want it to be done, because there's 15 different ways of everlasting God that's done. And so I would go on and find the version I liked. That usually it's the version that's the original, to be honest, like the Housefires version, or the United Pursuit version that's super long, 15 choruses or whatever. But that's the version I typically would like, and I would send my team an email. These are the songs they're doing, and then if there was a specific part I want for sure to happen that Sunday, I would make a note in the email saying, hey, Daryl, you're on guitar this week. Could you learn the lead to Everlasting God? And drums, pay attention to this song. Vocals, if we want to do these harmonies. Brandon takes a different approach. Brandon, you want to share what you do to get your team ready for the practice week?
Oh my gosh. Well, are you saying that there's actually a method? Because I don't think I even have a method.
He doesn't have a method.
No. You know what? Honestly, a lot of it is because when I came on board, they already had a pretty strong culture of learning the parts to the songs, because he put that together. So for those of you that don't actually know, he is now the young adults pastor at our church, but he used to be the worship pastor at this church. And when I came on board, he went to the young adults. He has a huge passion for the young adults ministry, and so just so you know that that's kind of
I got
why
fired.
No. No, it was cool. I mean, he even was an instrumental part of having me come. So we work well together. Everything's going great. I just wanted to point that out. No, so he set a really cool kind of precedence of professionality. I think that's not even a word. Professionalism. Yeah. Sure. And people learn the parts, and they come in and they make sure that the tone is really close to what they do. So it allowed me to be kind of the guy who messed it up a little bit in the heart of being more spirit-led. And I'm not saying he wasn't spirit-led, but I'm going to be more in the vein of, I want people to really have to pay attention to me a little bit more. The band to pay attention to me, because I guess a lot of it is because I want to be able to have the freedom to kind of flow around and that stuff. So I would say I actually agree with you on how you do it. Maybe just the practice itself looks different, okay? The practice itself for me is not per se, let's go through the songs and point out, maybe we'll go through the songs a few times and really perfect them, the beginnings and the endings. I actually don't practice beginning and endings of any songs typically, other than maybe the first song. And that's because I want to be able to feel free to go into the bridge of something if I feel like that's where the Lord wants it to go or whatever. So I'm just kind of we go through the songs one time, and really I'm not really practicing beginnings and endings. I'm just flowing into each song. And so that would probably be really the only major difference, Yeah. I still expect them to learn the parts and learn the songs, but I don't send them typically. They just know to go look because they're used to it.
Yeah, I think that's some of it. People get used to it, and it helps to have that kind of mentality that you when you're having worship team members come on board, that hey, you can do whatever you want, but if we're playing a song and it's got a part, maybe learn the part.
Yeah.
It helps. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the thing is being a producer, produce a bunch of records. We spend a lot of time trying to write these parts that really fit well within the melody of the song, within the breaks of the song and everything. And so these parts are very well thought out. And I guarantee you the parts that your musicians are going to come up with on the fly is typically going to be a little bit more, just slightly more distracting, just because they're having to think in the moment a little bit more, as opposed to coming up with some of the parts. So I think that's the positive of it is. But anyway, I'm open to both ways, but that's how they said it coming in. And so I have now just kind of tried to get it so that it becomes a little bit more flowy. That's really the major difference. Last question I'll ask you this time. No, actually, this is not the last. This is not the last question.
Second to last question.
Okay, so should we pay a worship leader before we are paying our senior pastor full time? And let me dig into the question a little bit. I'm not going to answer it. I'm going to help you understand. I talked to this person actually today, specifically, and what he's really meaning is this guy, they have a pastor that's paid basically 3/4 time. He has to work some of the time at UPS or something, a small church, and they feel like they need to bring in a worship leader, and they need to pay this worship leader whatever, $1,000 a month. A lot of the elders think that they should just pay him more so that he doesn't have to work that other job, as opposed to paying a worship leader and just do with volunteers. So what are your thoughts?
Well, I've been on full-time staff for a long time, and so I know it's nice to be paid full-time. I mean, it's awesome. I've been on staff here at the church for 13 years, and to not have to go out and try to find other work, it's really a blessing. What I can share and glean from experience of others, our pastor was here in Tri-Cities for, I think, 4 years before he went on staff. He had hired a secretary, and he had done a lot of things to kind of make sure that had a building. The church had a mortgage payment before they were paying him to be on staff. And just hearing his heart behind that was, essentially the more you invest into staff, you kind of limit yourself in a lot of ways. And so I don't know how to translate that to this situation per se, except to say that if you're the senior pastor in that ministry, I don't know that I would be seeking the full-time pay if it meant to sacrifice the growth of the church. And I don't know that it's sacrificial. It might be sacrificial that the senior pastor is not full-time. It would be kind of a situational thing. Mm-hmm. I mean, if the senior pastor was not able to do the full amount of studying and counseling that he needed to do to help grow the body, he needs to be there. But at the same time, if there's a huge gaping need for worship ministry at this church, and the pastor just doesn't want to work, 10 hours a week or whatever it is that he's doing part-time, because he just wants to have the comfort, I guess is the best way I could put it, then I would suggest that maybe you should put that money towards the worship pastor. Again, I don't really know without knowing the specifics and the people involved. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't know that there's a real biblical this is the answer, except for I would say get with your team and pray about it. I mean, your eldership knows the church, they know the needs of the people, and you guys should be seeking the Lord on that. So
the positives and negatives to this situation. I've been in 2 church planting teams, and the thing is the positive and the negative of I guess ultimately being bivocational or not being bivocational is this: if you're a senior pastor and you are able to get paid full time, you're able to put all of your time towards the church, okay? But in the beginning stages of a church, granted there's a lot of things to do, a lot of those things that are not senior pastor duties per se. They actually are set up team duties. You still have to come up with people who want to do children's and all that kind of stuff, even if you're meeting at your house. And so I think ultimately, uh, my experience so far has been that whenever I've had a bivocational church planter that's even full time at their church, um, they've actually benefited greatly in a lot of ways because they're actually out in the. I mean, one of the things you've got to do is evangelism.
Yeah.
So what are you going to do if you are not working at all? You're going to go and. I mean, I guess you better be going up to people cold turkey in the middle of the street or something at the coffee shops or whatever, and you got to be telling people about Jesus to try to get people to come to your church. But if you're at a job, and especially if it's a job where you're around a lot of people, you're already integrated into the area, and so you're able to get to know people and have relationships, and you'll be able to actually meet people through other people, and you'll be able to do evangelism possibly more successful. Uh, but even on top of that, I think the positive of that also could come into play when it comes to you now have a need for people to help you out, which then it forces you to delegate, it forces you to get people to help you. And if you can successfully do it and get people to help you, you actually have a more functioning church than if you have a 200-person church and you're the one doing everything. Just because you have more people coming to your church doesn't mean you actually have a functional church.
Yeah.
And so ultimately, I think it could force you to do some good things. But I think obviously it's a situation where you do need to assess your situation. Is your job weighing you down so much that you're not able to actually be a pastor? Because if that's the case, pray that God provides for you. Because at that point, of course, if he's called you to do that, you would need to believe that God's going to cover what you need to cover so that you can actually be the thing he called you to be. So,
yeah, I think ultimately end game would be, if you could bring this worship pastor on and the church grows because of it, and you could both be on, that would be end game awesome. Or if the pastor is able to go full time and the church grows because of it, you could bring the worship guy on. I mean, that's ultimately why you do that. You're not going full time just to be more comfortable, for sure. So,
agree.
Last question, and I think the way the question is phrased might give us what they think the answer is, but it says, should worship be a performance like we have made it, or should worship be a surrender to God? After all, we are worshiping him and him alone. I think I know what the asker of this question thinks.
He basically gave us the answer he wants.
Yeah. It should be a surrender to God. I love that. I love that heart, because absolutely that's what worship is. It's surrender. It's I think that's why one of the imageries of raising your hands is not just I'm reaching out to God. It's surrender to the Lord. That's like universal throughout the ages. Is you put your hands up, you're surrender to the Lord, or to anyone really. But the aspect that we shouldn't care about performance, or we shouldn't care what we sound like when we worship God, I think is irresponsible. I think it's to be honest, I think that if you're not trying to do your best, it's lazy. If you're not putting any effort into it and trying to, it's like in all things we do as believers. Again, I don't just consider myself in a position of worship ministry, so this is like my lane and I stay here. As ministry, you're a minister, you're a servant, and it works out to everything. And I always encourage my team, the people I'm serving with, like, I want to do it the best we can do it. And we may not do it as well as another church, and we may not do it as well as churches that have a lot more resources than us, but we're going to do it the best we can with what we have. And we're going to pray like it depends upon God, and we're going to work like it depends upon us. And that's always been my mentality. And I go into it and I seek the Lord and I want him to bless it. And so we have prayer meetings. We spend a lot of time seeking the Lord in these things. But ultimately, like, we got to put our shoulder to work and do some stuff and make things happen in a lot of ways. And I think worship ministry is no different. I think sometimes because it's more artistic, people feel license to kind of go, this is my craft, and it's not as much work. But I don't know. I feel like for me, it's like the same. I don't know if you agree with that or not. But
yeah, no, I agree. I agree completely. I mean, I think it's easier for us to say if we were not musicians and we were not a part of a worship team,
right,
and let's say we were part of the young adults ministry, that we would want to make sure that everything we do is excellent. And I think it is easier to say that because if we don't do it excellent, people feel left out. Like and excellence in a young adults worship situation, or young adults not worship, young adults ministry, is going to be: are we actually making everybody feel like they're welcome in our place? Are we making sure that our messages are solid and actually biblical, or and all that kind of stuff? Is there actually going to be food at the end if that's what you're doing? I mean, like, there's some very like detailed things that need to be done. But when you throw it into music, for whatever reason, we have two very extreme opinions. You have the extreme opinion of you either need to be really great, play skillfully unto the Lord, or you need to be one that is going to be more, no, God takes everything we do and he makes it all good. It doesn't matter how good we are or whatever. Yeah. There seems to be those two contrasts. And of course, with all contrasts, in my opinion, it's for the most part a married situation.
Yeah, married.
Where you absolutely, that's something that I think people who are all about performance, what they need to understand is that people who are excellent at what they do and they are really prepared and everything sounds awesome, they will then present what they have. And if they, in their mind, think that it's even anything but filthy rags, then they're actually insincere with what they're actually giving.
Yeah.
Because the reality is you can spend all that time and make sure that it's amazing. And don't get me wrong, most of us, especially in, I would say, our mid-30s down to the 20s, okay? I don't want to just like take out all other ages, but we actually really love when we go to a music situation and it's really well done. I mean, I think
you go older than that. I know the older generation likes. Yeah. They like concerts. They like to go to places.
It's true. I don't want to just
plays. So the whole thing. They like it too. I mean,
yeah, they would not go to a theater. Here's a fun example. So I went and took my wife to go see The Wizard of Oz in Portland one time. Okay, and I thought I paid decent money for these tickets. And so we go in there, and I thought, okay, this is the Wizard of Oz, the tour of Broadway, okay? Like, I thought it was the nice one.
Right.
And we get in there, and it's actually children's little theater, okay? Now, don't get me wrong, those little kids did great, but it wasn't done that well. And I had this expectation that it was going to be the thing.
Broadway.
And my wife didn't know what to expect because I told her I'd hyped it up so much. And so she's like, oh, that was not what I thought it was going to be. But, like, that's a good example. Is like, I think that we do have this expectation that things should be done well. So I'm going to say, yes, we need to do things well. And that is just literally I'll just say it's even cultural. I'm going to say it's cultural. Americans really do expect things to be great. So I think we should try to be good. But absolutely, we should not be trying to take away the honesty and the innocence of what worship really is. And that is to be actually pouring our hearts out to God and saying, God, I love you. I thank you for everything that you've done. And you can do that with, as like when we date our wives or when we give our wives presents. That can be done with a diamond ring, and it can also be done with flowers. And there is obviously a very big price difference of both of those things, and I think it would be the same thing. So I just think we can't expect everybody to be amazing, and it can't always be great, excellent, but at the same time, if we are okay with it just being subpar all the time, we're also missing the piece of, are we really giving our best? And so I think there's a contrast. It's supposed to meet in the middle. That's what I think.
Yeah, I think just simply put, we do not want to sacrifice, our hearts for the performance. I think a good way to put it. We don't sacrifice the aspect of worship so we can perform. But if you could do both, do both.
Yeah, amen.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, okay, so closing. Thanks again, guys, for checking this out. This is our 4th episode. And just, share this as much as you can, because we really want to continue to be able to make these things, and the more people that are involved, it's not just gonna just motivate us to do more of them, but more than that, we'll get more questions. We'll be able to really be able to vet through the questions and find the right ones. And also, we really want to be a resource if it's needed out there, and I think that it is. So yeah, so we have a few things coming up. For those of you that are in the Washington, even Oregon area, even Idaho and Montana, we have a conference that is going on October 11th through the 13th, and it is our EQ Worship Conference, and it's going to be like filled with awesome breakouts and information, everything from how to organize, practically your worship team, like through Planning Center or things like that, all the way to even a whole sound system tract, or not sound system, but sound ministry track, where people will be able to learn more about sound. And then also all of the different instruments. We have Citizens and Saints. We have a few friends of ours, Michael Bond, Brett Williams, and then EQ Worship, our band, will also be playing and leading worship. And then we also have Ben Corson, that is an awesome, speaker, and he's been doing a lot of really great ministry all around the world, and so it's going to be an amazing time. So please check that out at eqworship.com. You can sign up there, right?
Yep.
Okay. And then also, last thing too is we really are, as a band, we are actually really praying about coming out with a single or two coming up, and then also a Christmas thing. And so I just wanted to let you know that if I would love to know, what Christmas songs do people like you guys want to be able to use at your church, and maybe we can come up with some fun arrangements for some Christmas songs.
Absolutely.
So anyway, awesome. Thanks, guys. You want to pray?
Yeah, I'll pray. Lord, just thank you so much for this time as worship leaders and worshipers, Lord, just to gather and to consider these things that, again, I consider them to be utmost important. I think they're things that we should do with excellence, Lord, and we want to do because you are an excellent God. And, your word says that we're to be holy because you're holy. And a lot of the things we do as believers is simply because that's who you are, God, and we want to be that to this world. And so help us to love, help us to live the way you've called us to, and we ask these things in your name. Amen.
Amen.
God bless, guys.
Awesome.